Hello and welcome to another episode of the Landscaper Grows Show. My name is Mark Lamberth. I'm your host. Today I'm speaking with Matt Brand at Albert Lea Tree Service in Albert Lea, Minnesota. Matt, thanks so much for being with us today.
You betcha. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I'd love to start just by hearing what services you provide for your customers there in Albert Lea.
It's pretty traditional. We do removals, trimming, stump grinding. We do some right-of-way clearing. We also do plant health care. So that's like ash borer treatments, oaks, some fertility work, things like that. But pretty much the standard fare.
Okay, great. And then how many folks do you have on your team right now?
Right now, I think we're at about 6.
Okay.
6.5 if you include me.
Okay. Love it. Great. And then what is the geographic area that you guys are working in?
Southern Minnesota. Yeah, it's, primarily Albert Lea and Austin. We actually, splitting hairs, we're Albert Lea and Austin Tree Service. So there are 2 communities. We live right in between. So we turn left or we turn right in the morning. It's Freeborn or Mower County is primarily where we work. We have some customers. We're right on the border of Iowa. So we have some customers down in Iowa too, but not too many.
Okay. And then regarding tree service, I mean, you guys aren't doing any type of, say, landscaping and other elements. You guys are just totally focused on the tree service.
I guess, we plant some trees. I wouldn't really qualify that as landscaping, but we've taken on planting some trees. You go to these courses and you kind of get some tips and you realize, well, there's some valuable information there. And there's seems to be a limited need for that kind of thing because like most of the tree planting probably does go to the landscape. Whoa, sorry. Most of the tree planting does go to the landscapers.
Okay, great. And then I'm curious, how seasonal is the tree service business?
Well, being in Minnesota, at least for us, it is seasonal. And we talk about that a lot, how, you have 8 months, it's great. And then things get a little lean in the winter. I'm sure there's guys that do a lot of business in the winter. We typically slow down quite a bit. Access is an issue, cold weather with the guys working outside and the equipment, it's always hard. So it's slow January, February, March, depending on the season. So yeah, it's definitely seasonal.
Gotcha. Okay. And then curious about, how you guys sort of establish yourself as a just totally professional tree service as apart from, say, a company or, I don't know, a handyman or whatnot that's got kind of a chainsaw and is able to go in and do some of that work. I mean, obviously tree service is very technical, but I mean, are there ways that you kind of separate that off and really kind of highlight that, no, this is something that, a handyman or someone else is not going to be able to come in and do. This is technical, dangerous. Does that ever come up at all?
Yeah, that's a challenge. I have a lot to learn, but I do have a couple of credentials that most of the local tree services might not have. And quite honestly, I'm not sure how much that comes into play. I mean, I got to believe it does in some manner. I don't have a way of measuring it, but you do try to distinguish yourself with the ISA credentialing and a few other things from the guy who's just got, a pickup and a trailer. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's guys out doing that work hard, and that's great. There's a lot of people that aren't willing to work that hard. But it does, because of the insurance we carry and the employees and things like that, our cost of operation is probably higher than what they are. So sometimes you do compete with the guy on the weekends, like a lot of the lawn services. I knew a guy who had a very successful lawn service, and he said, my competition is every guy with a pickup and a trailer and a mower. I mean, so you kind of gotta, you do your advertising, you try to educate your people. Like I did some radio. I don't do a lot of advertising, but I did some radio about the ash borer. It's kind of moving through our area. It's kind of a big deal. So you have to offer up what you've got, and hopefully people value that and then come to you and figure, well, it's worth it. It's kind of like shopping at, what do you say, Walmart versus a more specialized store. You got to believe that there's some value there, because we'll get on site and we'll we'll look at the problem that the customer wants addressed. And if you happen to notice anything, and it has happened, where you can offer some other services, that's got some value with it too. So it's kind of it's a balance. You don't want to say, well, I'm going to charge more because I have more credentialing, but at the same time, you may in certain circumstances have more to offer than the weekend guy. Something.
Uh-huh. Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. And then we had talked here a little bit before the show. You actually bought the business in 2013. I'm always really curious about sort of acquisitions on the buy side and also on the sell side. Fascinated by folks that decide, instead of starting your own tree company, totally from scratch, of going in and purchasing one. How did that decision kind of come to fold there and come to happen? And what was it like, kind of doing due diligence and things to ultimately purchase the company?
Well, maybe the short, funny answer is desperation. I don't know how relevant this is. I'll be as succinct as I can. I was raised on a farm. I always thought I was going to farm vegetables, potatoes and onions. My folks did quite well when I was young, and I never really considered doing anything else. So you going through school, it's interesting. We have kids now, and the process that they go through, and the conversations we have, like, what do you want to do? The world's your oyster. They have no thing that they're set on doing. Where I didn't. I was just, I was going to farm, and that was it. Well, that all ended in 2001. It just fell apart. Well, we got a whole bunch of rain. The market's changed, and that was it. So, you're 28 years old looking at, like, what am I going to do? At least I had the good sense to go back to school. So I went back to school, got a degree in accounting, and started doing accounting work. Ended up at the Mayo Clinic doing internal audit work. They had a program that you could get your master's. So I did that for 2 years. So I got a master's in business. But honestly, I was just so unhappy working in an office. Mayo's a huge company. I mean, you're set if you stay. I was miserable. So it was anything out of an office. And I tried to farm again. That's too long of a story, but that fell apart as well. And then the tree service came up for sale. And it was a small local business through actually the landscaper that I mentioned earlier. He said, I'm not interested in buying it, but what about you? And I said, I'm on it. And so we got shot down by like 5 banks. And finally, the last one said, yeah, we'll take a chance. And the rest is corny, but the rest is kind of history. We got a big snowstorm actually in May. Then it gave us a book of work for an entire year. I didn't know what I was doing. We had a crew that came with it, but it was a pretty steep learning curve, and I was still learning. But that's kind of the history of how that played out.
Amazing. And then when folks sell a business, they often have what's called an earn out. So they, the owner needs to stay with the business for, say, 2, 3, 4 years to make sure that the kind of trajectory stays, what it was. If you're willing to share, did you have any kind of arrangement like that with the previous owner of the business, or was it just come in and buy it and take it over?
Yeah, more. I'd love to say there was projections and things like that, but it wasn't. He wanted to sell, and we wanted to buy. And I think everybody involved wanted that to kind of happen. So he had a number that he wanted. He said, I'd really like to get this out of it. And we talked about it because, as it turns out, his lender was the lender that we used. So we kind of said, yeah, we can try and do that. There are a lot of sleepless nights with that because we didn't know what we got into. And, you sign notes. That's a big deal. But it's worked out.
Amazing. And any type of huge surprises? Curious about, the reason why often companies do an earn out when they're buying a company is because they want to make sure that all the accounts kind of stay consistent and things. Any types of surprises with, losing any kind of business, or would it all just kind of pick up and just move right along and no surprises there?
One, when you start, and like I said, we had that snowstorm. So you're overwhelmed with calls. It was ridiculous. The first night after the snowstorm, maybe 200 calls.
Wow.
So you're overwhelmed. And my wife was really helpful. She's super organized. So she color coordinated the town, and we tried to prioritize as best we could. And so we jumped all over town. So you talk about maintaining accounts. That's interesting. I wouldn't have known who worked for us if they were in the QuickBooks system, because I bought the client list. So if they were in the system, you knew they were there. But if they weren't, I mean, you still went. I mean, because of storm work. And it was very impersonal. And by that, I mean, the further I get into this, you work for people for a number of times, and then perhaps you see a tree that's trimmed that we didn't trim. You're like, huh, well, I wonder what the deal is. Why, when you called, did they do it? They have somebody else, whatever. But I would say initially it was very, very impersonal because we're just trying to survive. So you're just happy to have the work. But as time goes on, you pay attention a little bit more to repeat customers and develop some relationships. That's one of the nicer parts of the job. You get to know some pretty neat people.
That's fantastic. How cool. Well, great, Matt. So great to hear the story of Albert Lea Tree Service. If folks are looking for great tree service there in Albert Lea or in southern Minnesota, what are some great ways to get in touch with you guys?
Well, we have a website, which actually was recently stolen. I didn't realize that was possible. So it's www.southernmntreeservice.org. If you go to the other one, you get some sort of dancing pickle that's, I think, selling Indonesian gaming or whatever.
Oh, no.
So we just got that fixed.
Oh, man.
Or you can email us, albertleatreeservice@gmail.com. Phone number is 507-377-8733. Pretty traditional. Most of our work is referrals, repeat customers, but that's how, it's the digital world now, and that's how people find us.
Sure. Fantastic. Great. Yes. Well, if you're in the southern Minnesota area looking for a great tree service to work with, take a look at Southern MN, like Southern Minnesota, southernmntreeservice.org, or you can give Matt a call at 507-377-8733. Fantastic. Well, Matt, thanks so much for coming on the show today and sharing all your experience, man. I really appreciate it.
You betcha. Thank you.